Hey everyone. Uh, Today we're going to go on a little bit of a discovery. And the reason why is because I found this video and it's a kind of like a biography of Asmongold's ideology. Um, and so, and honestly, I watched this already and the guy refers to him as a centrist. I feel like I'm a centrist. That's why I say, well, why my profile says I'm standing in the gap or whatever. Um, so I kind of want to compare and contrast. It's kind of what I'm thinking I'm gonna do. Uh, and so let's kind of get into this.
A few days ago, a Canadian Genshin Impact YouTuber decided young men are cooked. Or because Asmongold tweeted something incendiary and thought-provoking about AI and women. More on that later.
It,
But in 15 minutes, this guy managed to call Asmongold mentally ill, a loser, a degenerate living in filth, called Clavicular a meth head dropout, questioned both their sanity, and then had the audacity to crown himself the moral authority on masculinity. Because, get this, he's got a wife, kids, and retired at 33. That's his entire credential stack. A retired anime gambling simulator creator, appointing himself the savior of millions of men, while offering zero actual advice, zero engagement with the tweet, just pure concern trolling, packaged as an olive branch, while he calls you a loser. Peak sanctimony. A dying ideology cosplaying as maturity. And, as of recording this, he's already nuked his entire channel and privated everything except 2 videos.
Good.
So make of that what you will. But he's actually part of a much bigger picture, and that's what I want to talk about. The manosphere right now is a sea of guys selling you something. Tate sells you hustle porn and a $99 a month subscription to The Real World. Fresh and Fit sell
I
you
suppose I
dating
should get
strategy
premium
from a Miami podcast studio surrounded by Instagram models. Hamza sells you self-improvement courses through something he unironically called Adonis School. Iman Ghazi sells you agency courses from Dubai. Half of these guys are filming from rented Airbnbs in Marbella, pretending it's their lifestyle. The entire business model is the same. Say something provocative, build a following off insecurity, then monetize that following through courses and memberships that sell you the solution to the problem the content itself created. And then, on the other side of the same coin, you've got the performative sanctimony class, the Hassans and the M. Tashes of the world, who don't sell you courses, but sell you something arguably worse. Moral superiority as a substitute for substance. The feeling of being enlightened without actually doing or building anything. One side sells you aspiration you can't afford. The other sells you virtue you haven't earned. And both of them need you to keep consuming, to keep the machine running.
Yep.
Then there's Asmongold, a guy in a white t-shirt, streaming from the same house he grew up in.
So yeah, I completely agree with this. I don't know, narration. So I, I I don't like that masculinity thing. I mean, you're masculine as long. I mean, it's complicated, but I mean, I'm masculine. I mean, as long as you can do the basics of life, and you can stick up for what you want to stick up for, and you don't need to be like completely out there like um, Tate or whatever he referred to. And then Hassan Piker, like, yeah, no, I mean, I'm sorry. There's no reason that you should ever like have this superiority complex.
Eating $2 steaks, who's probably richer than a lot of these influencers combined, and who has never sold a course, never launched a membership, never once tried to monetize his audience's insecurities. Even Hassan, the most prominent champagne socialist on the internet,
Yep.
lives in a
Hypocrite.
mansion in West Hollywood while
Hypocrite.
calling himself anti-capitalist. Meanwhile, Asmongold, who advocates for a mix of capitalism and socialism, and actually tested left libertarian on the political compass, practices anti-consumption more radically than any of them. And I think the irony of that is worth sitting with. He just lives like this. It undercuts the entire manosphere just by existing.
Yep.
And the philosophy underneath it is worth understanding, because I think it's the most genuinely useful framework out there for navigating an increasingly competitive world. I'd call it ruthless, pragmatic realism. The reason I'm making this
Realism,
video
sure.
is because for the longest time, I was exactly the young man these people claim to be worried about. I've watched Asmongold for down near a decade now, back to
So
the
have I.
old WoW days of transmog competitions and guild drama. God, that feels like a lifetime ago. And I wanted to share why watching him has genuinely been one of the most useful influences in my life, as I think a lot of us in this audience probably feel the same way, as millennial men trying to navigate this increasingly brutal, confusing, and competitive Western economy.
Yep.
I'm not going to do any parasocial romanticization here. I don't know the man personally. But I think most of us have watched him long enough to know his particular brand of unfiltered honesty by now. And sure, he said plenty of stupid shit on the internet that even his most loyal fans would agree doesn't do him any favors.
Yep.
But overall, I do like his ideas on a lot of topics. I often find them quite intellectually provocative and psychologically challenging. The kind of thinking that forces you to confront assumptions you didn't even know you were carrying. Sure, he's a flawed thinker and a flawed human, but what thinker isn't? And I think the reason so many of us find him so resonant is because he thinks out loud without performance, no filter. No matter how harsh or uncomfortable the truth is, he just says it. Now, obviously, that's pissed off a lot of people, but I think as guys, we just find that refreshing. Most of us don't really deal with bullshit, and we can smell the performative political correctness that dominates Western discourse now from a mile away. And given the choice between difficult truth and comfortable nonsense, I'll take difficult truth every time.
Yep.
Whether he's talking about men's mental health, the dating market, politics, economics, culture, gaming, he'll say things like, "Yeah, that's bad, but it still exists," or "Yeah, I wish things were different, but they're not," and then just move forward from there. And something about hearing a guy say that, a guy who lost his mother and lived in poverty and had his teeth rot out of his mouth, something about hearing him say, "It is what it is," and then get up the next day and keep going, that stays with you in a way that no self-help book or motivational seminar ever could. Because what you're hearing is the residue of someone who's been through genuine suffering and come out the other side without pretending the process was pretty. And I think a lot of us need to hear that right now, more than ever.
So that's right there is exactly what I meant by why I wanted to start a YouTube channel. Because I've been feeling this way for a couple of years, and I never wanted to actually put my face on YouTube. Well, maybe one of these days, if I ever actually get my teeth fixed. But like that, and then the Sky Brawls thing is just like, oh hey, look, VTubers can kind of do this on YouTube, so and maybe get a little bit bigger and more successful. Some of them did get pretty successful, I think. So that's why I'm trying.
Because let's be honest, this is probably the most competitive time to be a man in modern history.
It
And
is.
it's only accelerating. Men make up only 42% of bachelor's degrees now, the lowest on record. Women in their 20s out-earn us. 1 in 4 guys under 35 feels lonely every single day. We're 4 times more likely to kill ourselves. And nobody in institutional power has any incentive to name any of this because it breaks their narrative. An entire generation swung hard right in 2024, not because of memes, but because they're desperately searching for frameworks that acknowledge what they're actually living through. And when every institution offers nothing but lectures about privilege, while your prospects deteriorate, you'll find those frameworks wherever you can. The only way forward is to stare down that reality, accept the cards this era has dealt us, and refuse to retreat into either of the two bubbles the manosphere is selling. The hustle porn fantasy that monetizes your insecurity, or the performative sanctimony that monetizes your moral comfort. Because both of them are just different flavors of delusion, and neither one will improve your actual life by a single inch.
Yeah. We gotta
Asmongold's
think.
entire life is the proof of what that framework looks like when someone actually lives it. We already know how successful he is, so I won't belabor the point. But the way he built it, starting with WoW guides on YouTube, encouraging clippers to distribute his content for free, diversifying across platforms so that when Twitch banned him it barely scratched him, building actual equity businesses like Star-Forged Systems rather than depending on platform revenue. All of that is worth studying if you're trying to build anything online today. But what really matters is where he built it from. Because this is a guy who started in the bottom 1% of circumstances in every possible way. Condemned house in Texas, poverty line, parents separated, mother developed COPD and couldn't work. He became her full-time caregiver because he couldn't afford help and couldn't leave her alone. He started streaming because it was the only income activity compatible with being stuck at home as a caregiver. And I remember him saying openly that unlike most creators, he literally started for the money because his teeth were falling out. In the creator space, there's this unspoken rule that you're supposed to pretend the money doesn't matter. Everyone performs the passion narrative because admitting financial motivation is seen as somehow impure or less authentic.
If I get money, it
When
would
the
be
reality
cool, but
is that money is why most people do most things, and pretending otherwise is just another layer of performance. And there's something almost contagiously liberating about watching someone refuse to participate in that particular charade. It gives you permission to be honest about your own motivations too. His mother passed in October 2021, about 2 years after his girlfriend and him broke up, and 3 years before his father passed as well. He admitted he'd planned to end his life after high school, but in his own words, forgot when Wrath of the Lich King came out. He's talked openly about all of it, and has said he doesn't care about sympathy. He just wants people to understand where he's coming from as a person. From the bottom 1% to the top 1%. Every conventional path was physically closed to him, and he built anyway. From a single room with a computer and an internet connection. That was the entire starting position for everything that came after. And I remember watching him react to a podcast about masculinity, where the host said something about how wherever you point blame is where you give away your power. And he just immediately latched onto it.
Yeah, it doesn't matter how
that's
hard
kinda
you
true.
think it is. Whenever you
I
wake
mean-
up the next day, you're still where you are. You can spend all day thinking about,
well, so it's not really that you give those people the power. It's that there's another video that I found that I'm planning on doing a thing. Like if you can't accept the failure is your fault, then you're just you know you're not going to learn from it. So if you point a finger, that uh, it doesn't fix anything. It doesn't change what you're doing. It doesn't. I mean, if you can't admit that you have a problem, then you're never going to grow.
I wish it was whatever, 150 years ago. It would have been so easier. Yeah, but it's not, so shut the fuck up.
And knowing where he came from, knowing he's not some rich guy theorizing about hardship, that just lands completely differently. He talks about how people build layers and layers of protection against ever having to take personal accountability. And honestly, that observation alone has probably been more useful to me than anything I learned in formal education.
Yeah.
And you can see exactly what happens when that kind of unflinching honesty meets the internet. Because the tweet that sparked this whole drama is the perfect case study. Polymarket posted an analysis showing that female-dominated corporate roles are more vulnerable to AI automation than male roles. And Asmongold replied with, "Too many fake jobs were invented to create artificial parity between men and women in the workforce. AI fixes this problem. Hopefully, after this is all over, women can go back to doing what they do best, being a mother or being a prostitute." Now, the packaging is crude, obviously. But Asmongold is a master rage baiter. And you have to remember, he's an online media personality and entertainer first.
So that's where I'm completely different. I mean, well, I'm not completely different. Like I would say that I'm not a rage baiter, but I mean, the other part, I'm hoping that I can grow into someone who's entertaining and that's just what I'm hoping. I'm hoping I end up being entertaining and a thought provoker and just in that context because I want people to start waking up to the fact that the stuff that we're all fighting about right now, um, be it left or right, and yeah, I mean being based, you gotta support. I've had enough of the tribalism. It's the tribalism that I'm tired of. It's like, oh, I mean, are there anybody who's kind of centrist? This is kind of a rhetorical question I have, is because maybe I'm wrong, but if you are a centrist, like I mean, and you're just going with the crowd, I think we're getting to the point where we need to decide to stop. And actually, centrists need to say, I'm a centrist and I don't care. I mean, I lean more left or I lean more right or whatever. But it's time for the centrists to actually just start culling um, the fringes, is what I think. And that's what I'm hoping for to see one day soon.
He doesn't operate in a vacuum. The attention economy is absurdly competitive. And if independent creators don't use incendiary framing, they get drowned out by the institutional media class. CNN and the BBC and the New York Times have been doing the exact same thing for decades. They just wrap it in institutional credibility and pretend they're being objective, while Asmongold does it openly, without the veneer. And in a culture that's increasingly allergic to discomfort, some truths will never enter mainstream conversation unless someone packages them provocatively enough to force the discussion. Because this essay is focused on the manosphere, I don't want to go off on a tangent here. But tweets like this do raise genuinely important questions. Questions like why the global sex work economy is worth over $100 billion annually and overwhelmingly dominated by women with virtually no demand for male prostitutes.
That's easy.
And yet pointing that out is somehow controversial. Why such a significant percentage of Gen Z women now see OnlyFans as the new American dream, and what that says about the economy we've built. Why Western economies have built such...
I actually want to expand on that. I think it's time for people to stop saying men are the perverts. Seriously.
Enormous layers of administrative bloat that don't produce anything. What happens when AI can do compliance and HR work cheaper than humans? How we use AI as a productivity tool rather than just fear it as a threat. And what it says about our culture when you can't even state a biological and economic reality without being labeled a misogynist. Topics we'll for sure cover in future videos. But the point for now is that incendiary packaging forces millions of people to encounter questions they'd never otherwise ask. And that's valuable, even if the delivery makes people uncomfortable. Which brings us to maybe the most important thing I've taken away from watching Asmongold over the years. And that's what genuine intellectual independence looks like in practice. We already talked about his anti-consumption being the biggest middle finger to the manosphere's entire business model. But that independence extends far beyond money into how he evaluates every political issue individually, rather than buying into any party's package deal. He supports universal basic income, which is a left-wing policy, He supports a constitutional right.
So I'm going to rewind it here in a second, a little bit. Hold on. But so this is where I'm definitely going to say that I disagree with Asmund because so the biggest problem with universal income is the same problem that there is with minimum wage increases, and because minimum wage, like the people on the top are always going to get their amount of money that they need to be happy and stay on the top. All what increasing the bottom line for the lower class people, um, it, it just ends up just cutting into the middle class. It just makes more middle class people poor. Um, Instead of it doesn't bring the poor people up. It brings the middle class down, and then the gap between the rich people and the poor people get even bigger because then there's more people who can't afford to try to counter the rich people. It, Minimum wage bad. Universal income bad. Universal health care, which wish it would be able to be done without the loss of health provider quality, and nobody's been able to figure that out. And so that's the thing. Like, so the middle class, the people in the middle class are really the only people who can actually try to, okay, legitimately through creating a business or something, work their way up to being one of the people on top again. And that's the thing. Um, it there's a lot to talk about there, a lot. And universal income, it just gives the opportunity for people to make bad decisions with money more, and then people who are technically in an okay position are now in a worse position.
Policy. He supports a constitutional right to abortion. Left wing. He's deeply critical of DEI. Right wing.
Uh
He
huh.
lobbied a Republican senator on consumer protection against loot boxes, which is regulatory intervention. Left wing.
Yep. Um, I so see I believe in some regulatory intervention stuff. Makes me left wing on some stuff like that. And the biggest thing, like, and this is never gonna happen, and I'm not suicidal, okay? Uh, I mean, capitalism is one of the greatest systems on earth. It allows people to gain wealth and be able to move more independently in the wealth spectrum if they learn things and um, and put the effort into actually working their way up, um, versus socialism, communism, all that stuff. So, but the one handicap that capitalism has is now finally rearing its head, and there's a lot of people who are angry about it, specifically on the left, and that's why you always say, tax the rich, tax the rich. Well, taxing the rich might work, but I think actually the biggest thing that we could actually try to work at and try to vote for is where the government institutes something that is similar to um, a co-op. I think they're called co-ops, where okay, you work there, you get a share of the profit, and that needs to be instituted universally throughout the whole U.S. Because what it is that right now the disparagement or the disparity between the top level earners and the working class is just growing and growing and growing. And one of these days, I mean, so actually, right now, economy wise, um, we're in what's known as, they call it the alligator jaws. Well, that I think that can actually apply in multiple ways. The alligator jaws is a term for the stock market, where the stock market's climbing so high and the bonds are going down, and at some point it causes some kind of collapse that uh, some somebody who's an economist can like explain this way really really well. But if you do that with other graphs, like the disparagement between um, working working people's wages and corporate profit margins, that's a huge one, and there's only a bad thing at the end whenever it decides to finally break. So that's where I'm on that one.
He says trans kids are being failed by parents, but would respect his own.
So and here's where I won't respect my kids' pronouns, um, because they were born one gender until they turn 18. They are fully converted. You know, everything's lopped off what needs to be lopped off. Then I will. So my biggest issue is actually the fact that certain people claim to be, and this is mostly men wanting to be women, not so much women wanting to be men, because I don't believe they have the ability to harm people as much. But men wanting to be women, you're not allowed to say that you're a woman, and I won't respect your pronouns until you are fully converted. You've gone through your estrogen, your, you know, testosterone removal or whatever, and your member and whatever goes along with it needs to be gone or converted into a sock. Sorry. Until that happens, you are still. I am still going to call you by your current physical pronoun.
Own children's pronouns because the relationship matters more than the ideology. Try placing that on any political compass. It doesn't fit anywhere. And that's precisely the point, because he's evaluating each issue on its own merits, rather than outsourcing his worldview to a team. And the reason this matters so much right now is that one of the most dangerous things about the current political landscape, especially on the left, is this narrow convergence of thought, where you're expected to adopt an entire bundle of positions as a package deal, and if you deviate on a single one, you're excommunicated. Whereas on the right, there's actually more intellectual diversity than people give it credit for. You've got libertarians and traditionalists and populists and techno-optimists who genuinely disagree with each other on fundamental questions. And that diversity of thought is healthier, even if the individual positions are sometimes wrong. And what really drives it home is how he handles accountability when that independence has real consequences. He got banned from Twitch for dehumanizing comments about Palestinians, and then walked away from OTK entirely, the organization he co-founded, because his political content was costing his colleagues sponsorships, and the split had to happen. When a viewer asked, "You got kicked out, didn't you?" he said, even if they'd forced him out, he'd agree with it. Which is uncompromising accountability turned inward on himself when his actions had consequences for people around him,
That wasn't
rather than looking for someone else to blame.
Yeah.
I think that kind of independent, critical thinking is going to matter more and more in the years ahead, because the world going forward is only going to get more competitive, more unforgiving, and a lot noisier. In that environment, the last thing any of us needs is the comfortable, performative, ideologically captured sanctimony that people like MTASH represent. That's just emotional comfort food for people who've already given up. It produces nothing, builds nothing, and leaves you weaker when reality finally catches up.
Yeah.
I think the
And you
most
just
useful
paid somebody
things
a
you
lot
can
of
carry
stuff.
into that world are exactly the frameworks I've been describing. Pragmatic realism. The ability to look straight at reality, no matter how ugly it gets, and act on it anyway. And independent thinking. The refusal to outsource your worldview to any team, any party, any algorithm. And critical consumption of information is going to become more relevant than ever, because as everything becomes more digitalized, ideas and discourse are only going to get more incendiary. Every interest group will weaponize information to serve their agenda, and as consumers of all of it, we need to develop the critical intelligence to dissect and engage with broader information without getting rage-baited into emotional reactions the way the MTASH class does. People who lack the intellectual tools to engage with a provocative idea, so they default to pearl-clutching and name-calling instead. You can't stop the world and ask everyone to be more polite to you. That's not how any of this works. The information environment is what it is, and you either develop the ability to navigate it, or you get played by it. On a more personal note though, again, I've been watching Asmongold for damn near a decade now. Back when his drama with Taliesin felt like the front page of the internet. Back when transmog competitions were the most important thing happening in our lives. Fun fact, the name Dalfang was actually my Worgen Death Knight in World of Warcraft, which is why the channel's named after him, and why the logo's a wolf. So yeah, this stuff goes way back. About 6 or 7 years ago, after university in the UK, I moved to South Korea, and then to Canada. And through all of it, I never stopped watching.
That's not good.
And it genuinely feels like time has just flown by. And if I'm getting sentimental, it's probably because it makes me feel a bit old now.
Yep.
In
Tell
a
me about
digital
it.
age, where information shapes how we see the world more than ever, I've always found myself resonating with Asmongold more than anyone else in the Manosphere. And I think his philosophy of ruthless, pragmatic realism, of anti-consumption, of genuine intellectual independence, might actually break the cycle that the rest of the space keeps spinning. The cycle of selling insecurity back to the people it was extracted from. And in a sea of Manosphere creators, all running that same playbook, or performing sanctimonious virtue from the other side of the same coin, the black sheep who refuses to participate has ended up being the most genuinely inspiring of all of them. But yeah, that's about all I have to say about this. If you enjoyed this, as always, consider leaving a like and subscribing if you haven't already.
Which I'm going to. And I like. So, actually, I've got a little story. 2 weeks ago, my my grandfather passed away in the winter time here, and 2 weeks ago we actually kind of, we had the burial ceremony and the family was up. And my family is like, I am a black sheep. I don't do well with my family. And currently, obviously, you know that drama that happens when you got a bunch of kids and their parents passed away. And yeah, I remember somebody came up to me, um, because I don't really want to say who. And they tried to they tried to get me to pick a side. They tried to get me to fight someone. And I um I remember what I said is, I'm I don't play that game. And that's literally how I'm it's how I'm feeling for the last year or two. And um granted, I mean, right now I would say that I'm trying to steer away from the really big blue pill of, woke lefty stuff. um, because we need well, realism. We need realism. We need to base everything we think of in truth, and that's where we need to go back to. We need to focus on truth, um, real science, real everything, uh, and and that's kind of where I am. And I need to. I know some of my content has not been entertaining, and I know that it hasn't been, and that's because honestly, until well, the weekend, I I was scared to actually do what I set out to do on this channel. I started the channel, and I I was scared of actually doing it, because I most definitely am much more introverted than Asmongold and a lot of people who are on YouTube, because obviously YouTube is an entertainment thing, and being extroverted gives you a far greater edge, than just someone who can try to use logic, and honestly, a lot of people don't want to hear the truth or logic. So I mean, I'm it doesn't really matter. Um, it is what it is, you know, because I mean that's what I kind of set out to do, and I'm hoping that I can be another voice in bringing people back to reality, is what I would call it. Um, and that's kind of what I'm thinking. So this is the video. Oh, and I suppose the one thing I actually never really mentioned is, um, I do all of this uncut, no edits, except for if I have to edit out like a commercial or something because I don't have YouTube Premium right now. So that's what I got. So I hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you the next time.